The stone is heavier than you expect. Your fingers trace its rough edges as the crowd's murmur grows louder. This isn't how you imagine justice would feel. Cold limestone warming in your palm, its weight pulling your arm down as surely as the weight in your chest. In moments, this stone will fly through the air. It will find flesh. It will draw blood. And according to the law given by Moses himself, it will be righteous. But nothing about this feels righteous. In the dusty streets of ancient Judea, death came in many forms: disease, famine, war. But perhaps no form of execution was more visceral, more communal, more psychologically devastating than the practice of stoning. In Hebrew, secular. The Torah prescribes stoning for 18 different transgressions: adultery, blasphemy, idolatry, Sabbath breaking, rebellious children who curse their parents. The list reads like a catalogue of society's deepest fears, threats to divine order, family structure, and communal purity. But the sanitized verses of Scripture tell us nothing of the reality. They don't describe the sound a skull makes when it cracks. They don't mention how long it takes for the condemned to stop moving. They don't explain what happens to a community forced to become executioners. The first witness. According to the Mishnah, the oral law compiled in 200 CE, a stoning could only occur after meticulous legal proceedings, 23 judges minimum, multiple witnesses whose testimonies had to align perfectly. Any discrepancy, any hint of conspiracy, and the accused walked free. The first witness bore the heaviest burden. Jewish law demanded that whoever testified against the condemned must cast the first stone. You couldn't hide behind the anonymity of the mob. If you spoke death, you dealt death. Rabbi Akiva, writing in the 2nd century, described the prescribed method. The condemned was pushed from a height twice the height of a man. If the fall didn't kill them, the first witness would lift a boulder, specifically described as taking 2 men to carry, and drop it on their chest. Only if they still lived would the general stoning begin. The place of stones, every city had one. The Beit HaSecular, the place of stoning, always outside the city walls, because death defiled sacred space. Jerusalem's was a limestone cliff face north of the Damascus Gate, where centuries of executions had worn smooth channels in the rock. Archaeological excavations in 2007 uncovered something horrifying at one such site near Beit Shemesh. Beneath layers of sediment, researchers found a pit filled with shattered bones, skulls with distinctive fracture patterns consistent with blunt force trauma. Carbon dating placed them in the 1st century BCE. Dr. Mordecai Aviam, the lead archaeologist, noted something chilling in his report. The victims showed defensive wounds on their arms and hands. They tried to protect themselves. They saw death coming stone by stone. The anatomy of execution. Death by stoning is neither quick nor merciful. The human skull can withstand approximately 520 pounds of force before fracturing. A stone thrown by an average man generates only 150 pounds of force on impact. This means consciousness persists through multiple strikes. Roman physician Celsus, writing in the 1st century, documented what he witnessed at a stoning in Caesarea. The condemned woman remained conscious for the duration of 13 strikes. Her jaw was shattered by the 4th stone, making her cries unintelligible. Yet she continued to raise her arms in defense until the 11th stone broke her right humerus. The crowd's accuracy deteriorated as the execution progressed. Adrenaline and horror made hands shake. Stones meant for the head-struck shoulders, ribs, knees. Death came not from a merciful blow, but from accumulated trauma, internal bleeding, organ failure, shock. The woman taken in adultery. Perhaps no stoning account is more famous than John chapter 8. The woman caught in adultery, dragged before Jesus in the temple courts. But the sanitized Sunday school version omits the brutal context. Under Jewish law, adultery required 2 witnesses who saw the actual act of intercourse. They had to warn the couple to stop. The couple had to acknowledge the warning and continue. The precision required makes you wonder. Who were these witnesses? Why were they watching? Where was the man? The Talmud suggests Jesus wrote the names of the accuser's own sins in the dust, but apocryphal texts tell a darker story. The Gospel of the Hebrews, deemed heretical by the early church, claims Jesus wrote, "You have killed the innocent with stones. Their blood cries from the ground." One by one, the stones fell from their hands. The psychology of the mob. Stoning wasn't just execution, it was communal catharsis. Dr. Sarah Bendor, studying mob psychology in ancient societies, identified 3 stages in communal executions. First, hesitation. The crowd gathers, but no one wants to throw first. Hearts pound, palms sweat. The weight of taking life paralyzes. Second, de-individuation. Once the first stone flies, individual conscience dissolves into collective will. The crowd becomes a single organism with a single purpose. Personal moral boundaries evaporate. Third, frenzy. Blood draws blood. Violence begets violence. The measured execution becomes chaotic brutality. Even those who came reluctantly find themselves reaching for stones. The aftermath was equally devastating. Participants reported nightmares for months. Some never spoke of what they had done. Others justified their actions obsessively, as if trying to convince themselves. The Roman variation. When Rome conquered Judea, they found stoning primitive but useful. Roman law preferred crucifixion for slaves and non-citizens, but they allowed subject peoples to maintain their traditional executions, with modifications. Tacitus records that Roman soldiers would sometimes assist Jewish stonings by providing sharper stones, jagged volcanic rock from Vesuvius that tore flesh more efficiently than local limestone. They turned religious duty into sadistic spectacle. In 41 CE, Prefect Ventidius Cumanus ordered a stoning in Caesarea, but mandated that soldiers throw every 3rd stone to ensure Roman participation in local justice. The execution that should have taken 10 minutes lasted an hour. The crowd vomited. Children were carried away screaming. Stephen, the first martyr. The Book of Acts records Christianity's first martyrdom. Stephen, stoned for blasphemy around 34 CE. But Luke's account, written decades later, sanitizes the horror. Clement of Alexandria, writing in 190 CE, preserved an eyewitness account from Menason of Cyprus. Stephen's skull was opened by the 7th stone. We could see the pulsing of his brain matter. Yet he continued to speak, though we could not understand the words through his shattered jaw. Blood ran from his ears like wine from a burst wineskin. The future Apostle Paul stood watching, holding the executioner's cloaks. Years later, he would write of being chief among sinners. One wonders if Stephen's broken face haunted his dreams on the Damascus road. The children who threw stones. Perhaps most disturbing was the role of children. The Talmud permitted, even encouraged children to participate in stonings of those who led others to idolatry. Teaching righteousness, the rabbis said, protecting future generations. In 1947, archaeologists discovered a geniza, a storage chamber for sacred texts, in a Cairo synagogue. Among the fragments was a 1st-century letter from a rabbi named Ishmael. My son has not slept for 7 nights. He wakes screaming about the woman's eyes. He was 8 when he threw his stone at the adulteress. I told him it was God's will. Now he asks me why God's will looks like murder. I have no answer. The slow death of a practice. Stoning didn't end with antiquity. It evolved, adapted, persisted in the shadows of civilization. Medieval Jewish communities scattered across Europe technically retained the right to stone blasphemers and adulterers. But the Talmudic requirement for a fully constituted Sanhedrin, impossible after the temple's destruction, provided merciful escape from the law's demands. Still, mob justice found ways. The Cairo Geniza revealed accounts of unofficial stonings in 12th century Egypt. Christian communities weren't immune. The Albigensian Crusade saw Cathar heretics stoned alongside their burning stakes. The mathematics of death. In 1953, physicist Dr. Ernst Zimmermann published a controversial paper analyzing the mechanics of ancient stoning. Using archaeological evidence and biblical accounts, he calculated the typical execution parameters. Crowd size, 50 to 200 participants. Throwing distance, 4 to 7 meters. Stone weight, 0.5 to 2 kilograms. Impact velocity, 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. Time to death, 7 to 20 minutes. His conclusion was damning. The practice was engineered for maximum suffering. Close enough to see the victim's face, far enough to avoid blood splatter. Heavy enough stones to wound, light enough to require multiple impacts. It was torture, masquerading as justice. Modern shadows. We tell ourselves we've evolved beyond such barbarity. That stones gather dust in museums, not hands. But the impulse remains. The desire to purge evil through collective violence. To make the community complicit in punishment. The stones have become words, digital, instantaneous, thrown from behind screens instead of city walls. We still gather, in mobs, still de-individuate, still hurl judgment at those deemed worthy of destruction. The ancient rabbis taught that after a stoning, the entire community had to undergo ritual purification, 7 days of isolation, meditation on what they'd done, recognition that taking life, even legally, even righteously, left a stain that required divine cleansing. The stone remembers what we try to forget. In Jerusalem's Rockefeller Museum, there's a collection of execution stones, gathered from various archaeological sites, each one a testament to terminated life. The curator told me visitors often reach out to touch them, then recoil, as if the weight of their purpose still lingers in the limestone. Perhaps that's the most honest response. To recoil, to remember that justice and cruelty walked hand in hand through history's dust. That ordinary people, bakers, farmers, parents, became killers when the law demanded it. The next time you hold a stone, feel its weight differently. Remember the woman who raised her broken arms against the sky. The child who threw and never slept soundly again. The witnesses who cast first and carried the burden forever. Some weights, once lifted, can never truly be set down. He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone. John